guys have Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackie and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Your defense is having the game like it had this past week. Is there anything you see when you're watching film that you can say maybe we can do better offensively to help out our guys on the other side of the ball?
I think that's pretty much what I say watching every snap of every game is how can I play better? What can I do better? What can we do better as a group? How can we improve? I mean, you just have to watch it always with a very critical eye and look for the inches. But many times it's much easier to see than that, just the things that need to be done better to win.
Reckless speculation.
Mr. Fourth Quarter Comeback. The fourth quarter Pharaoh. Mr. 400 yards passing. It was a loss, but he still played really well. Kirk Cousins talking about film study and things. This is Reckless Speculation Thursday here, ladies and gentlemen, where we bring in our friend from the 5 Eyewitness News sports team, inside information and speculation about your favorite Minnesota sports teams, Darren Doogie Wolfson, with his new, freshly updated computer. We're hoping nothing goes terribly wrong here.
Well, it's not necessarily new, but yeah, there were some updates made. I have no idea, Phil, if the updates are a good thing or a bad thing. I have no idea if you actually see me right now. I think you see me. Yeah, I see you. Hopefully you hear me. Hopefully the audience hears me, although who knows? There might be some people listening right now saying, you imbeciles, why do you keep bringing on that doofus every Tuesday and Thursday? But as far as I know, you can see me. You can hear me. By the way, Cousins should have how many more yards based on the Justin Jefferson touchdown that wasn't a touchdown? And I had a conversation the other day in the locker room with TJ Hawkinson. He's still upset about that third down drop. So that would have been a few more yards. So think about those two plays. Cousins' numbers on Sunday could have been that much better.
Yep. Yeah, amen. Let's go. We'll get to some Twins and some Timberwolves stuff. There was a funny little Pat Bev report that came out. But on the Vikings front, I think the two main topics here are Ed Donatel feeling the pressure a little bit here, or a lot, and then Vikings injuries. Is how likely is it the offensive line has looked very rickety in Christian Darrisaw's absence, and then Bradbury was out this last week. Are we trending toward the Vikings getting their 5 starting offensive linemen all playing at the same time here?
Well, Christian Darrisaw, yes. Garrett Bradbury is interesting. Jed, I texted you the other day. Now, he's been limited in practice the last couple days, but I was told, like, that back is pretty messed up. That at times, like, even a few days ago, he was, like, really struggling to walk. But the fact that he's been able to do some stuff in practice, in fact, you know, with other reporters, we're granted about 20 minutes of access. I was there for about 20 minutes on Wednesday, saw Bradbury snapping to Cousins. So it seems to be trending in the right direction. Put it this way, don't question the toughness of Garrett Bradbury in a contract year, so maybe that's on his mind. But Garrett Bradbury's back it's not good. Like, I don't want to put a number on it, 75%, 65%. Yeah, we may see him on Saturday, Phil, but I just know that back is pretty messed up.
Darrisaw, as we discussed on Tuesday's scoopage, Dukes almost certainly back on Saturday, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I had a conversation with him in the locker room a couple days ago. He's ready to rock and roll. I mean, he would have been okay to play on Sunday from a medical standpoint. I mean, he said what I told you guys last week, that just from a conditioning standpoint, when you haven't done much for the better part of about 3 to 4 weeks, it's hard all of a sudden to go out there and play 70 snaps at left tackle. So he was medically cleared to play against Detroit, just wasn't in a position conditioning-wise to play. Now with a full week of conditioning practice, he'll be good to go on Saturday.
Hey, guys, did you see this? It came up on it was not on the Wednesday injury report. It was on the Thursday, and it definitely raised some red flags with me. Danielle Hunter, limited neck, which, you know, I'd be like, okay, a neck's not good. But keep in mind, this guy missed the entire 2020 season because of surgery involving a disc in his neck. What do we know there? And that seems to me one that is probably not worth, that you probably shouldn't dismiss and sleep on. That's got to concern the team a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily dismiss it. Now, he turned me down for an interview in the locker room this week, but I said, are you doing okay? I'm doing all right, right? For whatever that's worth. Had a quick little back and forth with him, but he didn't want to do anything on camera. Cam Dantzler with the ankle, that certainly is something that you need to keep an eye on. Jordan Hicks is definitely banged up. He wasn't out there the first 18 minutes of Wednesday's practice. Then as I was leaving, I saw him come out. Harrison Phillips is a bit dinged up. My understanding is he'll play through it, but there's a bunch of guys like, I can certainly see a possibility where, Brian Asamoah is playing more and more snaps the rest of, at least on Saturday, maybe not the rest of the season, but, we saw it start a couple weeks ago. He was in for one defensive series. Then against Detroit, Asamoah got something like 13 or 14 snaps. I wonder if that number rises even more on Saturday.
I'm not necessarily placing blame here because injuries happen. It's so hard to evaluate a healthy draft class after 1 year, let alone one that's just been ravaged by injuries. But it's got to be really disappointing for Kevin O'Connell to be you're in the thick of this thing. You're also trying to fix your defense on the fly. And 4 of your top 5 draft picks from last year are defensive players that are basically either unavailable to you or you haven't really used in Brian Asamoah. And then the one guy of the first 5 guys you picked, the one guy that has played a lot, has been one of the worst at his position in Ed Ingram. So they're essentially moving through a 10-3 season, trying to fix things in December with virtually zero help, if not, subtracting from the team in the case of Ed Ingram from the first 5 guys they drafted back in early May, late April, Dukes.
I'm glad you brought this up, Phil. We did bring it up a couple weeks ago, but I don't think it's being talked about enough. The swing and miss so far by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, his first draft. Now, final chapters have not been written. In fact, I would still bet on a bunch of these guys, including Asamoah. I think it's trending toward Asamoah as soon as 2023.
Caleb Evans looks like he can play
snaps. I think a Caleb Evans can play too. So I would not write any sort of final chapter, but you look across the league, especially in the defensive backfield, how many rookie cornerbacks, how many rookie safeties are making a solid impact? It's like almost every team, Phil.
Yeah.
Seriously. And so for these guys to not have, as you said, outside of Ed Ingram, who doesn't grade very highly, and a little bit of Asamoah, I suppose, certainly on special teams, but there just hasn't been much there. Now, they'd love to have Lewis Cine healthy right now, right? So, that's one that, you just chalk up to incredibly bad luck and a really bad surface there in London. I did speak. Lewis Cine was in the locker room on Wednesday. Andrew Kramer of the Star Tribune and myself were able to get some comments from him before they kicked us out right at the buzzer. But he said it's tougher mentally than physically right now. And he was an observer at practice on Wednesday. So he's more and more around the team in the locker room, in meetings. He just said right now, the tougher part isn't necessarily the physical part. It's the mental part.
Cine was not playing too, though. So, I don't think that we should miss that point. It's not like Cine was playing and got hurt on defense. His primary role was special teams.
Yes,
so,
but my point is, Judd, I think he could have moved past Josh Metellus, for example. If he was healthy, maybe it's Cine out there, not Metellus.
Maybe
last Sunday. Not as soon as week 3. We knew that, right? Metellus had a better training camp, had a better preseason. Lewis Cine was not in a position to start week 3 when Harrison Smith was out. But I'm saying maybe by now, by mid-December, Cine could have moved past Metellus.
Yeah, that's projecting. But yeah, Cine and Booth, to me, because Booth had a ton of red flags caused by his injury history. Those two are right now. That really hurts you. I get 4th to 7th round guys not contributing a ton or just contributing on special teams. But man, it would be nice if Booth could, it's not like Booth had been healthy through college, got here and got hurt. He's been consistently hurt. And if they had drafted a cornerback who didn't have an injury history, it would sure be nice to plug that guy in with Dantzler, who's now sick and with the ankle problem as well. So yeah, I think that it's a very fair conversation at the top of the draft to say it would be nice to have guys contributing, because you certainly could. And Dukes, to your point, you're exactly right. A lot of teams are. It's not rare.
Yeah, and it circles back to what they should have probably done at pick 12. You don't move backwards. You take the consensus best safety on the board. If you were looking at safety that high, you take Kyle Hamilton of Notre Dame, who I haven't checked his numbers the last couple weeks, Phil. Maybe you have his PFF numbers somewhat handy, but, at least through the first, half of the season, Kyle Hamilton was showing pretty good for those Ravens.
He's one of the top 5 safeties in the NFL according to PFF.
Okay,
through the season. Yeah.
So there you go. And I mean, it's not like there were these varying opinions. Like it was across the board. Outside of his 40 time at the combine, he should have gone top 5. Then he's staring you in the face. He falls multiple spots. He's staring you in the face. You decide to move backwards.
Yeah. Hey, on Donatel here for a second. So it's been this sort of back and forth. I feel like even with him as he speaks publicly every week on, he's been clinging to how great his scheme is and how the players just need to be doing a better job within his scheme. He conceded a little bit more this week that, okay, we need to do a better job putting players in places, but stood for the scheme. I will say this. There have been one-and-done defensive coordinators in Vikings history. I think Mike Tomlin was the last one. He was one and done for a different reason because he wowed the Steelers, and he's still their head coach 16 years later. George O'Leary was a one-and-done in 2003. He oversaw – the Vikings started 6-0, melted down defensively in the second half of the season, and then melted down against the Cardinals in that key Week 17 game. So, I mean, how likely is it that I don't think Donatel and Kevin O'Connell have this, like, long-time, great, close relationship. He brought a guy in that's a 30-year veteran NFL coach who's had coordinator stops and said, hey, I need someone that can kind of just handle the side of the ball, and he's not. So what do you think the future is here? What's sort of at stake in the coming weeks for Donatel?
Yeah, I mean, Phil, definitely on my radar. Not out of the realm of possibilities that they do make a change in January, or if they advance for a bit, maybe in February. So certainly something that I'm keeping an eye on. Let's go back to January. Judd, you can certainly piggyback on this, but I never got the sense in January that it was just Donatel, that Kevin O'Connell was like, I need to get Ed Donatel. This is my guy as defensive coordinator. There were some other names in the mix. I never got that sense. So I don't think it was ever like this perfect marriage right from the get-go. Yeah, I'll admit that Ed maybe a little bit on Wednesday, Phil, decided to bite the bullet some, but there was still enough talk about, scheme working. The scheme isn't the problem, right? So there certainly is some sort of disconnect. Kevin Seifert wrote about this at ESPN.com today. It's worth a read. But there definitely is some sort of disconnect. But to answer your question, Phil, certainly on my radar come January.
So on that, too, Dukes, from talking to players briefly on the defensive side of the ball, what is your sense about like their concern, their feelings? Because I know that you were in there on Tuesday, so Donatel talked on Wednesday. But I'm just saying, as a whole, what is the mood of the defensive players? Because I feel like there might be frustration because if they're being told by Easy Ed, hey, the scheme works, we have 4 regular season games left right now. Players aren't dumb. Players know what works and what doesn't. And I think most importantly, players know when they're being put in a position to succeed or not. What did you think the temperature of the locker room was for the defensive players?
It was actually okay. I mean, I had a conversation with Cam Bynum, some others. I was in there Tuesday and Wednesday. So gathered a decent amount, and at least publicly, right? Open locker room, lots of reporters in there.
Yeah.
I just don't think that setting anybody was going to throw anyone under the bus. So at least in that setting, I don't want to say it was kumbaya like we've suggested before, but there wasn't any sort of, negative tone or anything like that. I mean, Cam Bynum, owned up to, hey, I have to do a better job, right? We can talk all we want about lack of pass rush, but there's more I can do on the back end to help the pass rush. So that really was the message that resonated Tuesday and Wednesday.
Hey, before we transition into some other stuff here, what should the Twins do post-Correa? There's an interesting Pat Bev report out there. Any other Viking stuff in your bag, Dukes?
No, I mean, outside of they added that cornerback that they liked pre-draft, Kalen Barnes. Yeah. He was a 7th-round pick. He was on Miami's practice squad.
Oh, David Blau. David Blau is gone. What are we going to do?
David Blau is gone, yeah. In fact, so I'm walking around the locker room on Wednesday, and, you observe things. You're in there enough. You start to glean information and all that. And
nosy.
I noticed, nosy. Well, but we're allowed in there. It's not like I did anything wrong.
Do we just hiding in a locker?
Hater. Yeah. David Blau's locker used to be next to or 1 or 2 away from Kirk Cousins, but I saw a nameplate missing. So then I turn around. Nick Mullins is, 20 feet across the locker room. He's not right there in that vicinity. I go to Nick. I go, what's going on with Blau? I imagine his nameplate's gone. He must have been picked up. He goes, yeah, I'm shocked it's not out there yet. He goes, I don't know if I want to be breaking any news. Well, I go, well, Nick, I mean, let's just connect some logical dots. Kyler Murray, torn ACL, out for the year. Arizona needs to add a quarterback.
Nick, why don't you sit down while I connect some dots for you here?
Yeah. And he smiled and
you're about to
he
break
said,
news. Congratulations.
He goes, I'm shocked it's not out yet. And I go, well, the NFL wire, the transaction wire comes out. This was like at 2:00 Central yesterday. I go, within 20, 30 minutes. Can't remember if it's 2:30 Central or 3:00 Central, but the transactions wire, visits, and all that stuff comes out at about that time. So I go, Nick, it's going to come out in a minute anyway. He goes, yeah, he's off to Arizona.
Nick, you can break it. It's okay, guy. Come on.
We got to go live right now. We got to go live. Take the soap operas off. Take the game shows off.
I think maybe Nick Mullins to celebrate the loss, not the death, but like the loss of his friend David Blau. Maybe he should go to the official sports bar of the sports dad, Judd Zulgad, huh?
Oh, that's a fantastic idea. In fact, it's not that far because it is Park Tavern in St. Louis Park, Louisiana Avenue South, and that is the sports bar of Sports Dad. You ask why? Because it's a massive sports bar. It's got bowling. It's got 2 bars. It is the ideal place for you to have a group gathering, a fantasy league draft. Guys, do you want to be a hero with your wife or girlfriend? Well, if you're going to throw her a birthday party, Park Tavern is the perfect place to do so. Park Tavern also open 365 days a year. So let's say Christmas Eve, you're like, boy, I'd like to do something. Park Tavern. Christmas Day, you know what? I'm tired of family. I want to go watch some basketball. Park Tavern, 952-929-6810 or parktavern.net. Parktavern.net to make your reservations at the official sports bar of Sports Dad. And who knows, Sports Dad might be sipping a Logic Bomb, which just was put on tap in the main bar at the end of the bar. Come up and say hi.
Beautiful. Also, a shout out
Love
to our
it.
friends. Hey,
my
real quick.
boys have been to a number of birthday parties at Park Tavern, so great spot for a kid's birthday party.
Yep, group gatherings, definitely the place, Park Tavern. You could also maybe do a group gathering over at a St. Thomas men's basketball or hockey game coming up here. Come and see Division I action. The Hoops, for instance, one of the better 3-point shooting teams in college basketball. So St. Thomas takes on, let's see here, North Dakota on Monday, and then NDSU on Wednesday. St. Thomas hockey battles Ferris State this Friday and Saturday night. Go to TommySports.com to get your tickets. TommySports.com to get your tickets.
I will tell you, Phil, by the way, I've spent some time over at men's basketball, St. Thomas men's basketball. Johnny Tower, the head coach, does a phenomenal job. I'm not making this up. If they played the Gophers today, the Tommies can win that game. Like, I'm not positive they win that game, but it would be very, very competitive. Those freshmen, this Andrew Rohde kid from Wisconsin, like, he's absolutely a high major player. His brother went to St. Thomas, older brother, some family connections here in the Twin Cities, right? And he loves the education he's getting at St. Thomas. But I'm just saying they have this player, this mid-major St. Thomas, this true freshman Andrew Rohde is absolutely good enough to play in the Big Ten. He is legit. Johnny Lee is really good. They have some really, really good players.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the Gophers don't want that smoke.
No, they don't.
Anyways.
No. And, I mean, really not in the foreseeable future. Now, from Ben Johnson's standpoint, like, there's not a whole lot you can gain. But, like, to me, instead of 4,000 people at the barn last night for Arkansas Pine Bluff, imagine if it was St. Thomas at the barn last night, 12 to 13,000 people.
Yeah. Yep. No, I want to fast forward like 2 years on the Gophers. Hey, real quick here, and we'll get to Twins. So there's a piece in Yahoo Sports here, Jake Fisher, and I'll just read this to you guys. Patrick Beverly, who is not faring well with the Lakers this season, is reportedly ready to return to the Timberwolves if he's traded and bought out by that team. So they would include his salary in a trade somewhere else, and then there'd be a buyout potentially. The report says, should Beverly ultimately get moved to a rebuilding situation like maybe the Pistons, the grizzled guard has a desire to return to Minnesota, sources said, should he reach free agency via buyout. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, knowing some people at the Pistons, they need to be blown away to move Bogdanovich. So, like, I don't see a match, Lakers and Pistons. the Rockets make a bit more sense. Maybe Eric Gordon to the Lakers in a package that includes Pat Beverly. And if he ended up with Houston, sure. In that instance, I would imagine Houston buys him out. I will tell you, and make no mistake, in terms of, this team's identity last year, character, all that, a leader, Bev certainly had a very nice influence. But I sense that Bev, after a certain period of time, he wears out his welcome, right? For lack of a better way of saying it. Not convinced this regime was ready to bring back Bev. And he was an obvious trade chip, something they were going to do. Eventually it was Rudy Gobert. But I don't sense, a bunch of folks over at Mayo Clinic Square were saying we need to bring back Pat Beverly this year. But considering the issues the Wolves have, now he really wouldn't help on the court. I'm missing where he would help on the court, but off the court, he would help. Now, Jake Fisher of Yahoo used to work at Bleacher Report. He's really, really good. So I don't doubt Jake's sourcing on that. I did reach out to somebody close to Bev after I heard about this. Here's what this person told me. OMG, Pat is with the Lakers. You folks in Minnesota know when he wears the jersey he wears, the city. So he's a Laker. But we know the Lakers are looking to do some stuff. They're stuck there in 12th place in the Western Conference. Anthony Davis playing at an MVP level. Can he stay healthy? LeBron James at 37 years old. They have those first-round picks in 27, in 29 to dangle along with Bev's expiring contract, Kendrick Nunn's expiring contract. So clearly, with today, December 15th, when trade talks really pick up, because all these free agents that signed, not all, but 98% that signed in the summer are now trade eligible as of today. The G League Showcase is next week in Vegas. So every front office will have a healthy contingent, including the Wolves. So a lot of trade talk happens face-to-face next week. So really today is when trade talks pick up. Clearly the Lakers are looking to do something. So them moving Bev, for some piece would not shock me. I just don't know if it'll be Bogdanovich in Detroit. But Gordon in Houston would make some sense. And if Houston buys him out, sure, we will certainly keep an eye on it. I do know this much, Phil. Bev enjoyed his time here. Certainly is very appreciative of Sachin Gupta for giving him that 1-year, $13 million extension.
So, Dukes, is your sense that that Finch grew tired of Bev, or where would that stem from? Because I don't disagree that a personality like that can grow tiresome, but would that start with the coach or more so with the people in the front office?
Well, all encompassing, although keep in mind, it's not like Tim Connolly has vast experience being around Bev, right? So it would be more the front office hearing from some people that were here last year. So I would say I'd leave it at that. But also, if aggregators want to pick up on this, fine, so be it. They
already have
that. Well,
it's out there.
Yeah, although
I just saw it's just been tweeted.
Yeah,
it's being moved around.
I didn't see much on the Miami Heat. I didn't see much on the Miami Heat Wolves talk. I brought up with you on Tuesday, Judd. Phil, I don't know if you heard our session on Tuesday that
Kyle Lowry.
Yeah.
So,
so that didn't necessarily get picked up. But I just hope it doesn't get aggregated that, Wolfson says, Bev wore out his welcome. I'm telling you,
that's true.
His impact here last year, really it can't be, it was huge. Put it that way. They don't get to 46 wins without Patrick Beverly. So make no mistake about that. I'm just saying, it was a perfect happening, all, coming together at once, that the Wolves were looking for a star. They had this $13 million expiring contract. Okay, yeah, probably time to move on. Plus, another team is going to want an expiring contract. So it was just this happy marriage in the summer. Okay, time for us to move on from Bev.
So, okay, I want to, because I know you guys talked about this Kyle Lowry is, maybe there's a little bit of contract remorse there in Miami. He's not the same guy he was. He's not totally washed, but so Kyle Lowry has this year and next year around $30 million, like $28, $29 million. Now, let's talk about D'Lo for a second here, because this would seem to be the core of the swap. D'Lo is an expiring contract. The Timberwolves, not exactly. They're not even in the play-in right now. So, and D'Lo's been playing largely really well up until he had to sit with a knee contusion. So his value has gone back up.
Yeah, I mean, they missed him last night, Phil. I mean,
yes.
I don't know if it's a wild statement to suggest that if Russell plays last night, the Wolves find a way to win that game. That's such an ugly game in LA, but with Russell, they perhaps win that game.
So talk me through this here. There's a case to be made for trading D'Angelo Russell before the February deadline, just because if you let that contract walk to the end of the year, it's not like, so yes, $30 million comes off your books, but you're so far over the cap, it's not like you get to, now we have $30 million to spend elsewhere. That contract is more valuable for you to trade it in the next 2 months than to let it come off the books. So that's something to keep an eye on. Kyle Lowry, how does that whole thing, talk me through the D'Lo value and the likelihood that he could get traded to maximize the value of the expiring contract, and then if there's any sort of Kyle Lowry possibility, and why that would even make sense.
Well, it wouldn't make sense. You're not touching Kyle Lowry's contract at nearly $30 million for next year. I get Miami trying to shake some things up. I do want to look at the luxury tax ramifications, not just the Wolves, but Miami. Now, maybe that 1-for-1, if it did happen, I don't see it happening, but if it somehow happened, maybe it would be about a wash because the numbers are relatively close. But like Phil, Kyle Lowry is 37 years old. I loved him in Toronto, right? I loved him at Villanova way back when. You're not touching Kyle Lowry next year. Phil, to me, what you do is, okay, if there's a better player out there that can help you the rest of this year than beyond this year, okay, yes, you ship out D'Angelo Russell. But here's another possibility, the one that I think ends up happening. You can use Russell in a sign and trade in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So you ride this thing out, see where it takes you. Hey, maybe Russell keeps going at the rate we've seen the last 4 or 5 games. Not sure I'd bet on that, but we saw him really good last year for a stretch of about 50-ish games. We saw him brilliant in the play-in game against the Clippers. Then he disappeared in the playoffs, much like he did the final 30-ish games of last year. But I'm just saying you can ride this thing out, make a determination in June. But I'm saying that would be a possibility. That would be the way I would go if I were Tim Connolly. Ride this thing out, see where Russell leads you this year. And I don't think it's going to end real well. Maybe they get as high as the 6th seed. I don't think they're missing the play-in, but if they're back in the play-in, that's a disappointing season. Remember, the goal, whether it was stated or not, was top 4 in the Western Conference this year, meaning home court advantage in the first round. It's really, really hard for me to see right now. It can change fast. It changed fast last year about this time for the Boston Celtics, even about a week or 2 later. So it can change. It really can. There are examples, but I just don't see how the Wolves climb as high as a top 4 seed. But I'm just saying, if I'm Tim Connolly, ride this thing out, use Russell in a sign and trade so you can recoup something come early July.
Going to the Twins, sir. So Correa's now gone, signs the 13-year contract with the Giants. Want to get to that, but before we do, I want to start you off with this question. What's the pivot to now? Pitching, is Rodon a realistic target? Because I think we've made it clear 13 years is ridiculous. So I'm not going to quibble with not matching the Giants offer, but I am curious about what they're going to do next here. And I'm guessing it's pitching because right now, in my humble opinion, there's not a lot of reasons to be excited about this team. And I think their next move here is very important just as far as perception status goes and where they're going to go to with Correa signing in San Francisco.
Well, they are in on Carlos Rodon. I mean, they've liked him for a while. They made him a nice offer last March before he ultimately chose to sign with the Giants. They didn't quite get to the Giants' money, but it was in that ballpark. So they had a healthy opinion of Rodon last March. Rodon has this great year with the Giants. Their opinion of Rodon has not changed. They met with him in person. It was a gathering of a bunch of Scotty B clients, right? Xander Bogaerts, Carlos Rodon, Carlos Correa, right before the winter meetings in Southern California. So the Twins have had a face-to-face meeting with Carlos Rodon. But Judd, let's talk through this. What history is there to suggest that Derek Falvey, Thad Levine are willing to give a starting pitcher potentially a 7-year deal, but even a 6-year deal? And if they went to 6, you mean to tell me the Yankees aren't going to go to 6?
Yeah.
Or some other team isn't going to go to 6? And so why would Carlos Rodon choose to be a Twin over other comparable offers? So really, the only chance you would have to get him is if you go to 7 years. It's really hard for me to fathom, right? I guess I'll have to see it to truly believe it, that Derek Falvey, Thad Levine are willing to give a starting pitcher, oh, by the way, a starting pitcher with some injury history. Many do, but he certainly has an injury history. I have a hard time believing they are willing to go to 7 years.
Yeah, but here's the problem. So they haven't, it's been 7 years for them now. I think this is going into their 7th year. They have not been able to develop high-end starting pitching of any level. I mean, Joe Ryan is a good starting pitcher, but they've also capped him in terms of innings load. He's a good number 2, number 3. Otherwise, they're kind of left looking outside the organization for trades and signings. And then if you're going to cap yourself on those streets of, well, okay, we'll look outside the organization, but we're not going to actually go the 6 or 7 years. And I agree that those pitchers are likely to get hurt and cost you a lot of time and money. So your best option is to have a pipeline like Cleveland does, like the Rays do, of guys that are coming through. And maybe this is just an impossible question to answer, but why, after 6 or 7 years, have they not been able? That's why Derek Falvey was brought here, to lead and to develop pitching. And they haven't. Why?
I agree. Now, I wouldn't sleep on Louis Varland. Certainly wouldn't sleep on Simeon Woods Richardson. I still think Josh Winder has some upside. So there are some young guys. But for the most part, Phil, you are spot on. Many of the free agents they've signed too, right? I mean, Derek Falvey, pitching savant, right? The Blake Parkers, the Jay Haps.
Judd's guy,
right?
Dylan Bundy.
The Shoemakers,
Archer.
Dylan Bundy, Chris Archer. I mean, we can go up and down the list. Homer Bailey, right? I mean, all these pitchers, starters, relievers they've signed. How many have flamed out? So it certainly is alarming. But there are still some young guys in the system that I point to and think they have a chance. I will add on pitching. So my understanding is Christian Vasquez, who will do something. He's in town for his physical, and he's scheduled to meet with reporters on Friday at Target Field. He has a history with Nate Eovaldi. Now, I know Nate Eovaldi isn't quite Carlos Rodon, but I think Eovaldi's pretty good. Now, I'm not banking on Eovaldi landing here, but Vasquez, the word is he likes Eovaldi, so he's another free agent pitcher that's out there. So that could be a potential pivot. The Twins have spoken with the Miami Marlins about Pablo Lopez, so that's another potential pivot. So, yeah, I mean, put it this way, guys. When you give Vasquez $10 million a year, and they had to go up to get him, by the way. The initial offer was not 3 years, 30. It was lower than that, 3 years, but lower than that. So they went up. They bring in Christian Vasquez at 3 years, 30. You're not hitting the reset button here in 23. And, oh, by the way, the Central Division is still there for the taking. The Central Division is wide open. You've got all these pitchers, like you make the trade for Mahle, right? You've got Sonny Gray. You've got Kenta Maeda. But all these guys are only under team control through 2023. You need to do something in 2023. You can't hit any sort of reset button. So, maybe they end up trading Max Kepler, but that's not a money-saving move. That's, hey, we have Trevor Larnach. We have Matt Wallner. Like, we don't need Kepler necessarily. Let's trade Kepler because we can bring back something of substance, right? So there's still a bunch of moves to be made. I know it's disappointing on Correa. I know it's disappointing on, maybe some other moves that haven't happened. But I still want to evaluate the totality of the offseason come like March 1st, not December 15th.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see, and it pretty clearly came from the Twins, Dukes, in the last couple of days, that they floated to The Athletic that they're getting calls on Sonny Gray and Maeda.
They're getting calls on more than those guys, Judd.
But what's the
if you're
strategy?
getting calls on Kenta Maeda, you're really not getting calls on Tyler Mahle?
But why?
Yeah, I know Mahle had a little bit of a shoulder issue, but
I'm asking, what's the strategy here? They're clearly floating this out.
Yeah,
what are they doing?
I mean, I'm positive where that came from.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, I wasn't going to take any sort of bait on that because they're getting calls on all sorts of guys, right? Like there was this big story, a few weeks ago about Louis Arise. And could the Twins trade Louis Arise? Absolutely. But like Max Kepler was left out, right? And then we talked about that the next morning, and I told you, and now there's all this Kepler steam
right
2 weeks later. They're getting calls on all sorts of guys. Sure, have they gotten calls on those guys because teams are looking at it now saying, okay, they missed out on their number one target. They weren't that good last year. Now they lose their team MVP from last year.
They should sell.
They should sell, right? So, yes.
Okay.
Have they gotten calls? So it's not factually wrong, but like, do I foresee, or put it this way, is anything imminent on the Twins trading Sonny Gray or Kenta Maeda? Absolutely not. And you mean to tell me, I'm telling you, so they're getting calls on Kenta Maeda after he missed a full year, but you're not getting calls on Tyler Mahle, right? I mean, it's not like the Reds just had the Twins engaged on August 1st, right? I mean, the Reds were talking to multiple teams, so there are fans out there of Tyler Mahle. I have a hard time believing that.
Yeah, I've said my piece.
I believe
about
the Gray and
Maeda.
Maeda. I'm just saying there's more than that. Is my
I'm
point.
just curious.
They
what's
don't
going
have a
on.
plan, dude. They do not. I mean,
That's my question.
They didn't have a plan on Correa. They just like, oh, Boris made a phone call and okay, we'll just do whatever you want. And then instead of thinking about how can we leverage this asset, how can we build a playoff team around this asset, they hedged and they had these ridiculous high risk trades for injured pitchers as their big moves, and then they wind up not having, quite frankly, not having the foresight and the guts to trade. Or I know he would have had to waive his no trade clause. And Dukes, I know you're going to light me up for this, but I'm not saying they should have traded Carlos Correa as the number one option. I'm saying you have an asset here. Either build a playoff team around him, and if it's evident that that team is nosediving between May, June, and July, you should probably do something savvy for the future. And instead, at the end of the day, they're left with no Carlos Correa, lowest attendance in Target Field history, non-COVID, no playoff team, no prospect capital. They just,
I get it.
It was a waste.
There are all
waste.
sorts of issues. I'm telling you, Phil, I told you on August 3rd, I'll tell it to you again. Trading Carlos Correa was never in the realm of possibilities, nor do I think it should have been in that moment. Yes, the rest of the season was a nosedive, but in that moment, I don't remember where exactly they were in the standings on August 1st. Maybe somebody can pull that up on Baseball Reference, but they weren't that far out. Like you couldn't punt. Right? Like,
okay,
what kind of signal does that send to other,
but what kind of signal
free
does
agents
it send
down the road, agents? You couldn't do that.
But then what kind of signal does it send? And I get that I have a tweet out there on the record saying I like the trade deadline. Yeah, because I didn't Google Tyler Mahle's shoulder injury. I'm sorry. I trusted that the Twins would trade for a guy that wasn't on the injured list 10 days beforehand. As the Reds the Reds said, "Hey, can you please come off the injured list?" Pitch twice. Yeah,
Scooby.
exactly, Scooby.
Scooby's like,
Scooby.
I'm done with the Twins.
Yeah. Scooby's a big fan of Spencer Steer, right? So, yeah, he was upset by the Tyler Mahle trade. But, yeah, there absolutely were red flags, right? I mean, hey, there were red flags on Sam Dyson going back multiple years, right? So, again,
Knuckles.
it's not a good reflection on the front office. It's just not. But I'm still saying there's still some moves to be made. So let's just see how the rest of the winter plays out.
That's fair.
And I'm with you, Judd. I had no problem not paying Correa stupid money for his ages 38, 39, 40 seasons. I mean, the Twins did offer him 10 years, $285, right? The mistake in hindsight, but in the moment, we could have said this too. Should they have just pivoted earlier to Xander Bogaerts? Because they liked him more than they're still engaged on Dansby Swanson, but they like Xander Bogaerts more than Dansby Swanson. So did they make a mistake before San Diego came in at 11 years? Should they have offered Bogaerts a nice 8 or 9 year deal, tried to wrap that up weeks ago?
Ultimately, their offer got smoked. Like, how are they so oblivious? Like, they literally spent months thinking,
was one team,
his wife likes it here. He's just going to come back. No,
and she did. Phil, I mean, yes, in the end, it doesn't mean anything. I get that, but the family had a suite at Target Field. So wife was in a suite often, had many conversations with Twins employees. Now, unless she was lying, but my understanding is she really liked it here. He liked it here. But in the end, it means zero.
Yeah,
I will tell you, in the end, even with the talk of the Mets maybe being interested in Correa, would the Dodgers potentially enter the mix? What about the Red Sox? It came down to 2 long-term offers. It was the Twins at 10 years. It was the Giants at 13 years. Good for him. He maximized his free agent opportunity. I mean, it worked out brilliantly for Carlos Correa. Now, I'm not quite sure how much he'll win the next handful of years, although that Giants organization has a history of winning. But being in the same division as the Dodgers and Padres, best of luck. But it worked out perfectly. But if you want to get mad at the Twins, get mad that they didn't pivot earlier, because we all saw this coming. I mean, I've got, tweets you can look at from weeks ago, our conversations. We knew all along, in the end, the Twins were never making him the richest money offer. They were always going to make him, I said this 2 months ago, they were going to make him the richest offer in franchise history, but they were never going to be, in the end, the team that offered him the most money. So nobody should be shocked that the Giants came in with a bigger offer.
Yeah. There he is. That's a great scoop session right there, boys. That is quality work.
Give me a cigarette. Stella, give me a cigarette.
Amazing. All right, Dukes.
One
Great
more
stuff.
note, or a combination of notes. The Board of Regents over at the University of Minnesota meeting today. So they're approving all these contracts. Fleck, Rossi, Shiraka, the new volleyball coach. The Shiraka extension, don't know if this is out. It goes through January of 2026. Same for Joe Rossi. So the two coordinators' contracts run through January of 26. The new volleyball coach, Keegan Cook, his contract runs through December of 2027. Base salary, $425,000. A little less than Hugh McCutcheon, but still very good money.
There he is, Darren Doogie Wolfson.
Thanks, Dukes.
Inside information.
See you, boys. Bye-bye.
About Minnesota sports teams. We'll talk to you next week, Doogie. Find his podcast, too, the Scoop Podcast, on the Scoop Podcast feed, 5 Eyewitness News.